We'll see when it goes live, and then it is live. Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Gallagher, GFT Programme Manager. Welcome to Cinema Essentials. So far in this series, we've looked at summer movies and music movies, and today it's the turn of films about family. Now, there are obviously thousands and thousands of films that feature families and tell stories about them, but what we're interested in asking today is, which are the films that really get to the heart of what family is, exploring the joys, challenges, and sorrows that come with being part of a family? Feuding siblings, estranged parents, inseparable family units, unconventional makeshift families, the movies covers them all. And we've been asking for your picks over the last few weeks and have had some great responses, which we'll read out as we go along. So if you're watching just now, we'd love to hear your comments on any of the films that we talk about. And please tell us your pick of your favorite film about family. Just add it in the comments section below the video. And also, just to note, we can only see the live comments on the GFT Facebook video feed. So you might be watching this on the Film Festival Facebook, or you might be watching it on YouTube. I don't think we can see those live, although we are trying to keep up with them. If you really definitely want your comment to be seen by us live, comment on the GFT Facebook video. Oh, we've got a comment from our fearless leader, Alison Gardner, saying that everyone is looking fabulous. Well, thanks, Alison. I'm sure you're looking fabulous while you're watching this as well. Okay, so joining me today are two members of the extended Glasgow film family. Glasgow film. Thanks.
See what you did there. I thought that was marvelous. Yeah,
it's good, wasn't it? Glasgow Film Festival co-director Allan Hunter and Film Hub Scotland program and marketing coordinator Charlotte Ashcroft. Welcome to GFT Cinema Essentials to you both.
Good afternoon to
you. Guys, this is an interesting category of film, isn't it? Because it crosses genres, and there are a lot of films you can consider. Charlotte, did you find it difficult to whittle it down to 3?
Yes, yeah, I had a long list of about 20 films, and I was even thinking of films that had just come out this year and last year. You know, Parasite, So Long My Son, and my list included things like Virgin Suicides, all kinds of documentaries. Yeah, it's a tough one. Lots of films with families in, turns out.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Allan, did you have any particular criteria to help you come up with your 3?
No, not at all. It was just whatever popped into my head. And also because I suppose my instinct is always to go to old Hollywood movies. I was trying to not necessarily go towards old Hollywood movies. And, you know, you have things like, oh, there must be some brilliant silent films, but I just don't think there's any scope to get some silent films in there. And most of the things that I initially thought of were quite grim. And I thought, this is just a reflection of my family experiences, but I hope not. And so, yeah, it was like trying to find things that maybe were a bit different emotionally as well. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of, you know, should you include The Godfather, or should you get into... It was like, should I find something more obscure, or we're kind of going for favorites? So
I did. I went obscure and weird.
I didn't have the courage for that.
Across genre as well, you know, like every genre it explores it in a different from a different angle.
I know. Even well, no, we'll get into it later. So that's great, and we will get into our list shortly. But first, a couple of bits of business. Just to note that, as usual, we have live subtitles available, and you can access them by clicking the link in the show description. And as ever, I want to thank BFI Film Feels Connected for their funding support for this series. We have a survey which is linked in the description for this show. Please, after watching, if you could fill that in, that would really help our funders and would really help us. So please do that. Like I said, if you've got a pick of your favorite film about family, let us know in the comments. Tell us why you think it's such a classic, and we'll add them into our conversation a bit later. So as usual, we are going to begin by looking at a recent release that fits the theme. and today we've picked The Truth from Japanese writer-director Hirokazu Kore-eda. Kore-eda is best known for his 2018 film Shoplifters, which won the top prize at Cannes that year and was a big hit with cinema audiences, including and especially at GFT. Kore-eda is an acknowledged master of films about families, and The Truth also focuses on a family, specifically a mother and daughter, played by Catherine Deneuve and Juliette Binoche. Deneuve very appropriately plays this grande dame of French cinema, Fabienne, who's recently published a memoir. Binoche is her screenwriter daughter, Lumiere, who we soon learn takes exception to much of what Fabienne has passed off as the truth in her book. And the film begins as Lumiere and her TV actor husband, played by Ethan Hawke, and their young daughter Charlotte arrive at Fabienne's castle-like home, and the conversation quickly turns to the subject of the book. Allan, we'll say more about the plot and where it goes as we go along, but first, I wanted to note that this is Kore-eda's first film made outside of his native Japan. So what did you think of how his style and interest translated to this European context?
It's interesting because I think initially my feeling was this doesn't quite feel like a Kore-eda film. It kind of feels like a French movie. Not that there's anything wrong with that from sitting watching it. But it did feel like he was slightly out of his comfort zone, that there were things that maybe come easily to him elsewhere that just took a bit more effort and were maybe slightly more clunky in this film. And what I really initially liked about it was just the sparring match between Binoche and Deneuve, particularly because Deneuve seems to be having such a good time playing this imperious, self-centered character. So I love that, but I think thinking back on it now, I mean, it does chime a lot with his interest in family and the family connections. I think there's a really interesting thing that Binoche is completely exasperated by this mother who seems oblivious to any damage she may have done in the past. But throughout the film as well, you see how much she kind of loves her and is protective of her. And it's, you know, it's like she's an exasperating mother, but she's my exasperating mother. And then as well, the relationship with the granddaughter that Deneuve's character is not terribly interested in until she sort of maybe sees herself reflected in that granddaughter and thinks, oh, she could be a little drama queen as well, just like me. So all those kind of connections kind of stuck with me more afterwards, because at the time I thought, this is a bit like an André Téchiné film or a Arnaud Desplechin film rather than a Kore-eda film.
Yeah, I watched it for a second time just this week, and I'd seen it last year, I think, initially. And on that initial viewing, like you, it was the Catherine Deneuve performance that sort of hit me about the film, and just the fact that she sort of towered over everyone else. And I've seen other commenters on the film kind of saying no one really gets a look in apart from Catherine Deneuve in terms of performances. But I would say on a rewatch, particularly Juliette Binoche, I think she really grounds the film emotionally, and from that family perspective of thinking about the dynamic between the two of them. Juliette Binoche has less dialogue really and less big scenes than Deneuve, but there's so much of her looking and feeling, especially on the set of the film that Catherine Deneuve's making, and it really gives you a sense of what you're talking about, this kind of tension in her of being sort of really angry, but also really loving towards her mum and not quite knowing how to make those things match. Charlotte, we should, say.
I think towards the end, I think there's a scene where Fabienne comes to her daughter, Juliette Binoche, asking her for help with the phone. And also when she passes out drunk, in an afternoon, and suddenly you can see the shift and the daughter becomes the carer. She's caring for her elderly mother, and that kind of tenderness. You can kind of see Fabienne kind of surrendering to that care of her daughter. I just really liked that scene where she asks for help with her phone. it's like, this is something that you need help with. You can't do this on your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's, I just mentioned it there as well, Charlotte, there's this film within a film aspect to the movie as well, isn't there? Which is quite fun. What did you think of that part of things?
Yeah, I think without that element of the film, it would have been so French and sort of very like straightforward domestic family drama. And yeah, I found it was almost uncomfortable to spend that much time with Fabienne at times, you know, in the confines of the house. But when all of the characters move to the studio, it creates this like separate space where they're all acting in a different way. And yeah, so it's a sci-fi film based on a short story about a mother who is terminally ill, but she can travel to space where you don't age in this story. And we don't know, and returns every 7 years to visit her daughter, who ages throughout the film. And Fabienne, Catherine Deneuve's character, plays the daughter as an old woman. It's kind of like 2001 almost, that end bit, you know, like so she's playing the daughter of a younger actress, and it's very meta, very it kind of creates this it allows Fabienne to kind of be confronted with aging in a really interesting way. I think that's really clever, that part of Kore-eda, to kind of take the action into a new place. And then at the end, it's in the future. It's just like it's set in a sci-fi future when she's an old lady. And I think Fabienne finally is like, oh, wow, I'm mortal and I'm going, yeah, where am I, like, where's my legacy after this?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's great that it does all that for the film, but I think when you see them in the studio actually making it, you think, gosh, that looks like a terrible film. You know, you think, why is she doing this film? Because really it doesn't look like the greatest role in the greatest set or the greatest script or the whatever.
It's really corny. It's very cheesy, some of the sort of specific. But in a way, it's like those are the moments that Lumiere wanted with her mother. There's lots of, you know, and then Fabienne has all these moments where she's confronted with the younger versions of her character. The actress is playing her as a young woman, and it all becomes reflective of this Sarah character, the actress who was her rival when she was younger.
To me, the film within the film, it like works as a way of sort of further exploring everything that's going on with Fabienne and Lumiere, but you would never want to watch that film because it looks really boring.
Wouldn't be programming.
Not a GFT. We did. It's a shame. We had The Truth all ready to go. It was going to be released that week that we had to close. We did thankfully get to screen it a couple of times at Glasgow Film Festival, as you know, Alan, and it went down. It went down really well. The other thing, so we can't spend too much time in the film, but Alan, for some audiences, this might be their first experience of a Kore-eda film.
No,
it might, Alan.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned earlier, he's made a wealth of films that show a really deep understanding of families in all shapes and sizes. I wondered if you could tell us about any of your favorites.
Starting now. I mean, if it was their first experience of Kore-eda, then I hope it leads them on to seeing some of the other films, and maybe particularly seeing Shoplifters, which was the recent one before that, and which also would have been at GFT. And I mean, I love Shoplifters just because it has such a kind of Dickensian feel to how the story develops. And it's also one of those kind of films that just makes you think about things differently even during the film, that it kind of changes your ideas of who these people are and what they're doing and, you know, what family means and where it can come from, not necessarily from, you know, blood ties. And all the ways that develops. So, and he also has a wonderful way of of being very emotional, but not being overly sentimental. Or there are lots of moments that kind of tug at the heartstrings, but it doesn't feel like he's really crassly doing that. It just emerges from the emotions of the relationships and the families and all that. So yes, do see Shoplifters.
Yeah, and Shoplifters, it struck me, it's another one that I watched again recently, and it struck me that it's a story that when you get to the end of it, the story itself could be told like a tabloid newspaper story, and you can imagine exactly what the headline would be and how we would be perceived.
It would be an ITV thing with Davina McCall and
right. And I guess,
did you ever think you'd hear Davina McCall and Kore-eda in the same sentence?
Maybe next film.
Yeah. But I think, you know, it's similarly another film of his that I love, Like Father, Like Son. It takes a kind of almost ripped from the headlines scenario and then asks, what would it really be like to be the people in those situations? And Like Father, Like Son is about a dad who discovers that his young son is actually not his biological son, and due to a mix-up at the hospital, the babies were switched at birth. I mean, it could be, you know, an American comedy, you know, like with that kind of setup. But and the boy is 5 or 6, I think, by the time this information is found out, and it treats that kind of what if scenario with just a real respect for everyone involved, with a serious, like, what do you do if you suddenly, you know, and it's that question that you were asking as well, Alan, how significant is blood in the family? You know, what is family? Is it just like biological relation, or is there something else, you know, that, and he asked that question so well in that film, just as he does in Shoplifters.
And in Our Little Sister.
Yes, that's a lovely film too. Tell us about it, Charlotte.
Well, it's about 3 or 4 sisters who, when their father dies, discover that they have another sister, his daughter, with another woman. And yes, it's a very gentle, sort of quiet, tender film where the sisters kind of get to know each other, and they take their new sister, who's younger than them, under their wing. And yeah, I mean, it literally is a world away from the truth. But then as I was watching it, that there are certain themes that he returns to, eating, like preparing food and eating around the dinner table, conversations that happen around dinner. Yeah, that kind of like very subtle and gentle emotional crescendo that suddenly kind of hits you. Like in Shoplifters, there's a kind of, you know, well, and like in The Truth, when they're all dancing and they've had dinner with Luke's family, and there is something so kind of bittersweet and emotional about those moments. But yeah, Our Little Sister, highly recommend as well.
Yeah,
beautiful.
I mean, I think as well that in, you know, trying to think of films about families, I was trying to find things that were emotional and that struck a chord, that you would watch it and you think, yeah, I've been in situations like that. I've seen that. I've heard stories of that. And I think, as you said, Paul, that's what you do. I mean, that's what Kore-eda does. There's these weird and wonderful tabloidy stories, but it's just getting to the emotional truth of that and the reality of that, and making that work. And so, yeah, it's what you were saying there. Like, I know someone that just discovered a couple of years back that they had like 4 or 5 brothers and sisters, half brothers and sisters, that they never knew they'd had until much later in life. And so there's all these things you kind of think, yeah, that's a kind of tabloidy story, but it's the emotional reality and the truth of things. We're back to the truth.
The truth, yeah. Yeah, it's somebody's real life, and I guess that's what Kore-eda gets to. Okay, brilliant. Well, you know, if you stop watching here, there's your top 3: Like Father, Like Son, Shoplifters, and Our Little Sister. They're a brilliant set of films. If you haven't seen those, then totally recommend that you get to see them. And I'm sure that we'll have them back at GFT at some point, because, you know, more Kore-eda films on screen, I'm all for that. Okay, The Truth is currently available as part of a subscription to Movie. So if you're on there, you can watch it there, or you can also rent it via Curzon Home Cinema or Amazon. And if you've seen it and have any thoughts to add, You can put them in the comments right now, or you can email us at feedback@glasgowfilm.org. We always love hearing anyone's comments about films. And speaking of comments, we've had a couple. There was one right at the start, apparently. Jackie Bergson, Allan, said, "It's incredible that Allan's first thought was The Godfather. Mine also." So there you go, The Godfather.
Telepathy.
Yep. And then James Colley has commented saying, "I recently rewatched The Squid and the Whale, which was equal parts joyous and very heartbreaking." And yeah, James, that's one that it went through my mind as a possibility for this too. I remember feeling, I don't know, mixed emotions at The Squid and the Whale.
Yeah, well, Baumbach, he's another great families.
Yeah.
Director.
Marriage Story as well. That was another one. Great.
We'll just sit here and reel off titles.
Yeah. Okay. Now it's time to get into our list. So which films do we think are the absolute essential films about family? Let's start with a pick we had emailed in from Scottish filmmaker Peter Mackie Burns, who audiences may know from his film Daphne from 2017 and Rialto, which is his most recent film that was at Glasgow Film Festival this year and will hopefully back at GFT in October when it's released. He wrote in with his recommendation. Charlotte, could you read it for us, please?
Yes, I can. Ingmar Bergman's 1982 semi-autobiographical masterpiece, Fannie and Alexander, is a pie into cinema and family life, but ultimately to the power of imagination to shape reality. Set in 1907, it charts the lives of an upper-middle-class theatre-owning family and is a compelling, occasionally funny, intensely humane, dark and mysterious work, and an ideal entry point for anyone interested in the currently out-of-fashion Swedish master's work. He's out of fashion.
Who knew?
It teems with family life from the first frame to its last. Bergman's direction and the performances are confident, unhurried, and entirely convincing throughout. Veteran cinematographer Sven Nykvist's lighting is unparalleled and psychologically astute. The film isn't without its issues and imperfections. A slow-motion stunt feels slightly past its sell-by date, and its sexual politics are very out of step with contemporary life. Like all great work, its imperfections don't detract from its power. Fannie and Alexander is often included in lists of the best art house films of all time, but that's no reason to simply accept its greatness. It stands the test of time and has influenced countless films and directors, including the wonderful chronicler of his own family, Terence Davies, and also Wes Anderson's highly stylized early comedy, The Royal Tenenbaums. The film is unarguably long, and its pacing perhaps slower than what we are accustomed to these days. South Korean director Bong Joon-ho, however, has listed it as one of his favorite films and stated that it has the most beautiful ending to a feature career in the history of cinema. High praise indeed from a very high-profile cinephile. So why not watch it and make up your own mind?
Yes, I love that.
Fantastic recommendation.
Yeah. I love that you finished by encouraging others to watch, because I think that's what this Cinema Essentials chat is all about. Hopefully, as we talk about films, it inspires you watching to go and watch them. So thanks so much, Peter, for those comments and that great way to start us off. So
I think it's currently on Mubi.
Is it?
Don't take my word for it. I think it might be in the Mubi library.
Ah, right. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's one on Peter's recommendation, I want to check out. And oh, there's another comment here.
Did it not used to be shown in parts? Was there a TV version as well? Because I seem to remember it at one point being shown on BBC Two, and it was in 4 large chunks or something like that.
Which would maybe help with the overlongness.
I could be hallucinating, but I think that did happen.
Okay. Oh, we got a comment. David Gatton's referring to The Squid and the Whale. If this really was autobiographical, I always wondered whether Baumbach was the horrible older or nicer younger brother. I don't know, but
if Noah's listening, he can chuck in a comment there and let us know.
Okay, start us off then, Alan, with our list. What's your number 3 film about family?
As I said, a lot of the things that initially came to mind were quite grim. So I wanted something that was a little more joyous and warm and things like that. So I've chosen Vincente Minnelli's Meet Me in St. Louis, MGM musical, 1944, which is a warm hug on a cold afternoon kind of film to go to. Starts in summer 1903. The Smith family in St. Louis, as the city prepares to host the World Fair the following year. It's a family with mum and dad. There's 4 daughters, I think, a brother. Grandpa lives with them, so it's one big family house. And it's as the seasons go by, there's scenes in Halloween, at Christmas, the kind of growing up of some of the girls, the falling in love with the boy next door, with the cloud hanging over them that dad has decided foolishly to take a job in New York that would kind of pull them away from everything they know and love and take comfort from. And it's a musical with great numbers, the trolley song, the boy next door, and Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. That will warm the cockles of your heart. Even though it is very sentimental and very Norman Rockwell and all those kind of things. But there you go.
Oh yeah, it's lovely. It just makes you feel good inside, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As you were talking about that, it made me remember another classic. It's not quite as much of a revered classic, but it's from the same period with a whole family living in a house together, which is Frank Capra's film You Can't Take It With You.
Oh yeah. Jimmy Stewart and Jean Arthur and Lang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is it's a lot of fun. I wouldn't put it in my top films about family, but I was just reminded of it, and it's full of it's full of Capra cheese, to be honest, but it is
nothing
really
wrong
enjoyable.
The best in the business.
Yeah, really enjoyable and a great cast. Well, that's a great pick to start us off. Charlotte, what's your number 3?
Yeah, I went for a documentary, The Wolf Pack by Crystal Moselle. Came out in 2015. It was huge when it came out. They visited lots of film festivals. So it's about the Angelo family, which is 6 brothers, their sister and their mother, who were sort of effectively held captive in an apartment in the Lower East Side of Manhattan by their father, who was a Hare Krishna. And when he met their mother, he had ideas about sort of creating their own tribe, moving to Scandinavia, living this very free sort of nature-filled existence, and for various reasons that aren't explained, that didn't pan out. So that he went completely the other way, and locked his family in this apartment, very rarely going out. And the boys, there's 6 of them. They all have this amazing long hair, and their sort of lifeline to the outside world is moving. And there's these absolutely amazing scenes where they're recreating word for word scenes from Reservoir Dogs, Batman. They've made all of their own costumes and props, and that's how they've sort of come to know the rest of the world, is through, well, ironically, through these ultra violent Hollywood movies. But actually, they're so articulate and they really do have an understanding of their situation. And it's just an incredible film. Visually, the story, the sort of the fact that she met them in the street, in New York. She followed them, and this kind of came out, and also her footage is supplemented with footage that they've shot their whole lives on VHS tapes, which adds this extra dimension of how you can see how the family's grown over the years. And then it sort of moves towards their emancipation when one of the boys, when the father's out, makes a break for it. And that kind of starts their process of leaving the apartment. It's just an amazing documentary, and the boys are so such great subjects, I think, and the mother as well, the transformation of the mother throughout.
Yeah. I remember when it came out that year, like you said, it was one of the really big documentaries of the year, and they all came to GFT. We had them here for Glasgow Youth Film Festival.
Yeah.
They were a really interesting bunch. And Crystal Moselle, like you say, the director, she's just got this skill of finding stories.
Yeah.
She did the same thing with the female skateboarders skate kitchen, which was similarly, that was more of a drama, but it started with real people and real community. She sort of got a way of finding these communities. And yeah, I agree. The Wolfpack is fascinating. And in terms of family, that question of like, well, it's terrible. Like how the dad, you know, objectively, it's really awful. But then the story that the boys tell is not, we were abused and our lives are destroyed. It's more complicated than that. And I think the film does quite a good job of showing you the complexity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they're quite matter of fact about the situation, and you know that they point out that you know the initial sort of idea was to protect them from the outside world, and you know that's obviously gone completely wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But what, you know, they have this amazing bond with each other. They're this sort of, you know, they all know what they want to do with their lives. They all want to go and make films.
Yeah.
You know, some of them are now, like, you know, working in the film industry. Yeah, again, it's bittersweet, isn't it? And this amazing, you know, ending scene where they're out with their mother. I think Crystal Moselle said in an interview, it's actually the mother's transformation that she found the most kind of moving and profound.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. The mother story, I'm remembering now, it's years since I've seen it, but yeah, the mother story is the one that you're left like, oof.
Because what she wanted for them, you know, and she homeschooled them, you know, and I think again in this interview, Crystal's saying the way that they are is because of her. Like,
yeah.
But you know, they're amazing. They've got a lot of empathy. They're really, yeah. Great
Brilliant.
doc.
Yeah, great doc. Great to get a documentary on the list as well. There are loads of great documentaries about family too. So, and if anyone else has any other documentary recommendations, please add them to the list. Right, for my number 3, we're going to go back in time again, back to older cinema. My number 3 is a 1955 film, Patha Panchali, by Satyajit Ray. I only recently watched this incredible debut film from Satyajit Ray, and it didn't immediately strike me as one to go on this list. It's a brilliantly observed naturalistic drama about an impoverished family in a rural Bengal village in the 1920s, seen through the eyes of Apu, the youngest member of the family. But I thought of it more as a film about childhood when I was thinking through films than a film about family.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I considered it, the more I thought, actually, this film captures so much of the truth of what a family is and how it works. The 4 members of this family, Apu and his older sister Durga, their mother Sarbajaya and father Hariha, are all clearly defined through the film as individuals with their own desires, and we get to see all of their stories as they kind of spread out, if you like, from the central family unit. But then they also clearly are a unit together through life, even though not always physically. And Ray shows us this really just by observing the trials and joys, but mostly trials, to be honest, of their life as they struggle to exist. It's a really beautiful film, and it's also a bit of a miracle of a film. It was made by people who were mostly learning on the job. Ray hadn't directed a film before. His cinematographer, Subrata Mitra, was a stills photographer who had never shot a film. And other department heads were similarly inexperienced. And added to this, they had to stop and start production over a 3-year period due to lack of money. But through it all, Ray was a curious observer. It's adapted from a novel, a really famous novel that everybody knew there from what I've read. But he wasn't limited, if you like, by the structure of the novel. He just looked, what is this rural life like? Because I don't really know it, and decided that he was going to just let his camera discover. And it really worked. He found so much beauty in this tale of hardship. And the other thing I must note is the incredible performance of Karuna Banerjee as Apu's mother, Sarabajaya. She was a theatre actor who didn't really have much interest in films, but her performance here is absolutely one for the ages. She shows, I think, what it really is to be a mother, all the pain, love, joy, and frustration in ways that really connect so powerfully. I can't recommend this film highly enough. And it's also, sorry, I'll just add this final thing. It's also a film that has benefited so much from restoration technology. The original film was completely lost and destroyed in a fire, but thanks to the amazing people who work in Bologna at the Cineteca, it was painstakingly restored, and now there's a brilliant restoration of it, which, to be honest, it must look better than the film did when it was first released. Like, it's incredible. So yeah.
Sounds like you should be programming that at GFT as well.
Oh,
Give
man,
people, you know.
Yeah, I absolutely want to do the Apu trilogy, and you know, we know that when we reopen, we're going to be limited with space. But as time goes on, and we get the space to kind of do more, hopefully, I'd love to have the Apu trilogy up on screen. Oh, there's a comment here.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I haven't seen it
carry on.
for a very long time, but it was always one of those benchmarks of films you should see. You know, you should see your Bergman, and you should see Papa Panchali and things like that. And I just remember a sense of the boy's wonder at just the ordinariness of life, and the kind of running to catch a glimpse of a train, because that was just such a big moment. And yeah, full of poetry and full of lovely moments.
Absolutely.
Sorry,
no, Allan, you've been told by David Gattens, our colleague, you aren't dreaming. There were two versions of Fannie and Alexander, a 3-hour theatrical version and a 5-hour television version.
There you go.
David says neither are on Mubi right now, sadly. So, yeah.
See, if you were programming it, because some of Fannie and Alexander at the beginning has a lot of Christmas stuff, and it made a great kind of 5 matinees at GFT and just show the whole thing.
Yeah, and we could get Peter to come and introduce them.
There you go.
That's it.
I love it when a plan comes together. Yeah.
Okay, before we come on, Allan, to your number 2, I've got an email here from Alex Stevenson, because none of us really have picked anything in the horror genre, but Alex astutely observed that family is a big theme in horror movies, and he's picked a few that he's linked together. So he says, Hereditary, the Ari Aster film from 2018, was so good, in my opinion, because the horror came from family tension, a situation that is already uncomfortable. Then he mentions We Need to Talk About Kevin, Lynn Ramsey's 2011 film, is also scary for the same reason. The idea of not being able to click with your own son is pretty horrifying, let alone him becoming a mass murderer. Very true, Alex. And then Happiness. He's really going for the grim.
Brilliant.
Happiness, the Todd Solondz film from 1998, is sad and darkly funny for the opposite situation, where a boy's father is a serial predator. The situations in both those films, so Happiness and Kevin, are so dire because the mother in Kevin and the son in Happiness will have to carry their family shame with them for the rest of their lives and take the blame for it. Their houses both get vandalized in those films. And then he finishes by saying Tilda Swinton and Toni Collette in We Need to Talk About Kevin and Hereditary gave 2 of the best and most underappreciated performances of the decade, in my opinion. So, Alex, thanks so much for those picks. And yeah, that's great stuff there. I think we can all agree that those are great choices.
Yeah. I was considering Happiness, but I thought best not.
For Sadness instead.
No, just let's not go there.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Someone else suggested Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
They did. That someone was Jason Wood.
Great.
Yeah.
Jason Wood from Home Cinema. I couldn't tell if he was serious or just trying to kind of stick in a
things up with it.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
he was serious. I think he was serious.
I think you
Rosemary's Baby, and yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's some great, if you want to look at the dark side of family, then horror is a great way that filmmakers have found to do so. Okay. Anything horrific from you next, Alan, at number 2?
No, horrific is not my manner. For my number 2, I went with the beloved Pedro Almodovar, and All About My Mother. Available, which I think is just one of his really great films. He dedicates it to 3 actresses, to Bette Davis, Gena Rowlands, and Romy Schneider. He dedicates it to his mother. He dedicates it to all mothers. And there is that element to it of Cecilia Roth plays Manuela, whose son dies very early on, her teenage son. And so she goes to Barcelona in search of the boy's father, who never knew that the child existed. And whilst there, she kind of reconnects with some old friends. She becomes this sort of mothering, nurturing figure for a whole collection of figures. An actress who's appearing in Stage and Streetcar Named Desire, a very old friend who's trans and who's a prostitute, a nun who's pregnant, played by Penelope Cruz. So there's that kind of nurturing there, but there's also that sense of creating her own family. The thing that Armistead Maupin has called your logical family, those people that you gather around you who are your support, your comfort, the people that love you, the people that you can rely on, that not necessarily have anything to do with blood relations, but is that kind of alternative family. And it just seems such a kind of in praise of that, in praise of the family that you create yourself. And it looks fantastic, and it's got great performances. And I kind of watched it the other day for the first time in 20 years. And it really does hold up. But also I kind of felt that I wanted to see it on a big cinema screen, because I wanted to sort of step in to that world. I wanted to feel it was kind of taking me over, rather than, I mean, I watched it on quite a big TV screen, but I wanted it bigger to step into that. And it's, it's about Pedro as well, and it's about his falling in love with cinema and relations between fathers and dads and mums, and so it's got everything, really.
Yeah, it really does have everything. It really, it just keeps on. I mean, Almodovar does this all the time. Like, kind of, you're 5 minutes into one of his movies and he's already told you 10 stories. But yeah, I rewatched All About My Mother again just recently, knowing that you were going to talk about it, and similarly love it, and would love to see it on the big screen, as with all his films. We played it at GFT just last year. We did a season of his films.
Of course you did, yeah.
Glory. And yeah, people love coming to see it, so I'm sure we'll play it again. But yeah, the other Almodovar film that I thought of, which kind of connects to All About My Mother, is Voltaire. Just seeing, it was interesting watching Penelope Cruz in All About My Mother and thinking of the character that she was going to become in Voltaire, and the sort of similarities and differences between, is she called Ramona in Voltaire? I can't remember. Between her character and the Manuela character in All About My Mother, they're kind of similarly sort of strong and decisive and capable mothers, but then there's differences as well. The moments when Manuela kind of really breaks down in All About My Mother, you don't find those in the character in Voltaire, Penelope Cruz's character. She's like always strong. But they're both fantastic pictures of mothers.
And the other thing is, during lockdown, Pedro's written a new script, which is Parallel Mothers, I think it's called. It's 2 women who give birth on the same day, and what happens to the lives of those involved. And allegedly it will be Penelope Cruz who stars in that. So,
wow,
the thematic line in his films is pretty strong and pretty surviving.
Yes, absolutely. Right, Charlotte, what's next from you? You're number 2.
Another Spanish language film, Lucrezia Martell's La Cienaga. from 2001. It's her first feature film. I suppose people might be more familiar with Zama from 2018. It's very, well, similarities and differences with Zama, but it's a very oppressive and busy film, sort of focusing on two families who are spending the summer together in this sort of crumbling, decaying mansion in North Argentina. And it opens with this amazing shot of the parents by the pool, which is sort of green, covered in algae, very stagnant, and they're just drinking. And then the children are kind of running riot off screen. And it opens with one of the mothers having a terrible accident, and she sort of takes to her bed for the rest of the summer. And then the two families kind of revolve around her. And it's very non-linear, sort of dreamlike, soporific, lots of little episodes of violence and budding sexuality and sort of absent parenting and various things that the children are getting up to. Lots of action happens off screen. Have you seen it?
I've not seen it.
Yeah, I've seen it, and I mean, again, it's when it came out, so that's close to 20 years ago. And you just kind of remember the sort of the torpor of it, that watching it in a cinema, it kind of felt like, has somebody turned up the heating in here? Because you kind of feel enervated by it, and this whole kind of family mired in a sort of malaise that presumably is reflective of bigger things in Argentina at the time. It's like a Chekhov story that kind of curdled in the heat or something like that.
Yeah, and she based it on her own childhood, like upper middle class Argentina, who they are kind of stultified by the they're sort of suspended between tradition and community and like globalization and capitalism, and they're kind of stuck in the middle, and that the adults have sort of given up more or less, but the children are this kind of, they're exploring the world for the first time. The teenage children are still very spirited and sort of but you can see this kind of inevitable slide into becoming their parents. I just thought it was very interesting and kind of experimental representation of being on holiday with a family, that kind of
and no escape.
Not speaking from experience, but like another family on holiday, and everything's very heavy and intense, and these sort of little micro episodes that are going on, and I think there's an amazing scene where the two mothers are on the bed and they're talking about like what the children need for school, the medicine, and then in the corner the children are kind of sitting there like covered in makeup, like semi-feral. They've all got guns and they're off hunting in the forest, in the swamps. La Cienaga translates to the swamp, and it's just a very, very interesting film. It's actually available on Amazon Prime for free. Well, not for free, with a Prime subscription, but it's a really interesting film, and I think it says a lot about how the economic and political situation that you're in kind of seeps into the family dynamic. It's great. Again, I really felt like I wish I was watching this on a big screen with nothing out, with no other distractions, so I could fully be in the swamp.
And topically, Lucrezia Martell's new film, Choco Bar, she won a prize for that at Locarno yesterday, which is a prize given to films that are sort of in the pipeline and getting made. And it's a kind of hybrid documentary drama about the environmentalist Choco Bar in the 70s. So there's a new Lucrezia Martell film to look forward to as well.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant pick. Now, the thing about Lucrezia Martell is that her films, we've found at GFT, they're quite difficult to get hold of, to play in cinemas. We tried to do a Cinemasters Lucrezia Martell season a couple of years ago and had to give it up, unfortunately, because it just wasn't possible to find the rights to the films. So, Charlotte, like you, I also want to see this in the cinema and will work tirelessly until it is so.
You probably just need to get a contact for Lucrezia.
Right, yeah, and get her.
Go direct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's it's not an easy film by any means, but I think it says something about family dysfunction that's really potent. Yeah.
Well, talking about films that say potent things about family dysfunction, let me tell you about my number 2. It's already been mentioned already. It's the Royal Tenenbaums, Wes Anderson's film from 2001. Now, as with all of us, this pick is very personal. Like all these, it's the only way you can go, isn't it? You have to go personally with what are the films that you respond to. So I'm going to tell you about the journey that I've been on with the Royal Tenenbaums over the nearly 20 years since I first saw it. I really didn't like it when I first saw it, and I watched it, I think, for the 4th or 5th time earlier this year, and now I see that it's a masterpiece. Obviously, anyone can see that the film is crafted to perfection, but when I first saw the film in my early 20s in London at Islington's Screen on the Green, I think, I just couldn't see past Royal Tenenbaums' terrible self-centeredness, arrogance, egotism, awful behavior for a father. He was a despicable, insensitive father and a neglectful husband. And from my young, intolerant perspective, he did not deserve forgiveness. That's kind of how I felt when I first watched it.
What harsh young man you are.
I was completely. I didn't know what real life was. But but the thing is, things change. You get older and you understand that people are not and never can be perfect. And we see that, I think, most clearly in the people who are closest to us. And, if I can just get real for a minute, that's why we have to forgive if our families are going to work. And over the years, I've watched the Royal Tenenbaums over and again. I've realized that Royal is actually a completely broken man by the point we meet him in the film. He's desperate to make amends and actually only too aware of how awfully he's treated his family. He's brilliantly played by Gene Hackman as well. And I think, people can be put off Wes Anderson's films as they find them too affected or stylized or precious, but that misses that Wes Anderson really loves people. And his films are really full of warm characterizations of people who would often be written off. And ultimately, the Royal Tenenbaums, I see now, envisions the possibility of reconciliation even amongst the most messed up family. And that makes it really great. And also, it's absolutely hilarious. It's like so funny. So that's why Royal Tenenbaums makes my list. And Charlotte, I know you said it's your favorite film.
It is my favorite film of all time since I was 13, 14. I think it was the first art house film that I ever saw. And I literally went immediately upstairs and cut my hair into a bob. And
wow.
I'm going to be Margot Tenenbaum from now on. This is who I am. But I had a poster framed, like one sheet of the Royal Tenenbaums for years above my bed. And the tagline was, family isn't a word, it's a sentence. Mm-hmm. And I used to read that. That's smart. I don't think it particularly even applies to the film, but yeah, love it. It's a very special film for me. I think, like you say, it's mannered and it has all of those like Wes Anderson quirks, but the characters are just so, well realized, well played. It really feels like they've lived in that house for a long time.
Yeah.
And it deals with some pretty heavy stuff.
Oh yeah.
Divorce, suicide attempts. It's still very like, and it's just brilliant. Like everyone in it, Ben Stiller,
I think a lot of sorry, Alan.
I was just going to say, and I guess in retrospect, it feels like the last great Gene Hackman performance, because it's not long afterwards that he retired. And the irony of all that is how many members of the cast have I've now recalled what an absolute pain he was during the filming. He didn't really want to do it, that he was kind of a bit short-tempered with everyone else that kept blowing their lines whilst he was a complete professional and stuff like that. And then, almost like the film, they've come around to say, but he was really great, and he's Gene Hackman, and we kind of love him, and I knew what he was doing and all that. But there seemed to be some kind of parallel going on there during the making of it.
Yeah.
Man. And I think, you know, thinking of Wes Anderson's other films as well, thinking about family in that kind of more community sense, he has this way of just envisaging these communities, people who are drawn together and then find a sense of belonging together, you know, from Moonrise Kingdom, Grand Budapest Hotel, Fantastic Mr. Fox, you know, like he's got this way of just showing, you know, people can get along and get together and life can be lovely, you know.
We love Wes. Please come to Glasgow sometime, Wes.
Oh yeah, do, Wes, do.
And he has, you know, the actors that he uses over and over again, they are like a family, you know. Like,
yeah. And it's a family that seems to be growing bigger and bigger and bigger. Each of his films has a cast of, like, you know, 20 more actors are added. Hopefully, also, Wes, if you're watching, we'd really love to see The French Dispatch sometime, please. And also, Royal Tenenbaums, I should note, was also mentioned by a couple of other people on Twitter. Suzanne Jordan mentioned it, and I think Alex, who we read the email from earlier, mentioned it. It's in a lot of people's top lists of family movies. Okay, Allan, it's time for your number one choice.
All right, we're doing my number one choice.
Yes, we are.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I have gone with one of the absolute classics of world cinema, and chosen Ozu's Tokyo Story, which frequently comes up in critics and directors' lists of, you know, the greatest films ever made. And I mean, Ozu spent almost his entire career looking at families and what made them work and what binds them, what tears them apart, all those little things. And this it's a story of a retired couple who go to Tokyo to see various family members. And it's a kind of great adventure for them, but kind of littered by disappointments because the children seem to have other things to do or don't quite have the time, see the parents as more of an imposition than something they'd welcome. And it's, I suppose, reflective maybe of Japan at the time, of different generation coming along that was more self-centered, more pursuing their own lives and not having time as they once had for an older generation or respecting that older generation. So it's the encounters they have with the families, how that leaves them. It's ironically not a blood relative, but a widowed daughter-in-law that's the one that really kind of cares for them and has some sense of devotion. So it's those kind of things, and how you're resigned to that, how there's loneliness in all these situations, and how people have their own lives, and whether family matters or doesn't matter to them, and it's beautifully shot and it will break your heart.
Yeah.
There you go.
I couldn't say it better, but in fact, I'm going to try and say something else because it's also.
I'm sure you can say it better.
Yeah, Tokyo Story is my number one. And when we realized that we both had the same one, we just thought, well, it's so good. Let's just both talk about it. But yeah, it's a great film. And again, like, just speaking from a personal reaction, when I first watched this, which was only like 5 or 6 years ago, it's one of the few films I think that really made me think about my life choices. You know, like you watch it and I think you go, am I putting the priorities where they should be in my life? And Ozu is such a subtle filmmaker that he's not going to bash anyone about the head with a message or a question. But as the film goes on and you watch this narrative, you get to the end and you realize I've been shown a picture of, well, what my life could be. and what my relationship with my parents could be. And is that a picture that I like the look of, or is there some way that I want to respond to that? And I found it so powerful. And again, on rewatching it again, the end is so poignant. There's a conversation between Kyoko, the youngest daughter, and Noriko, the daughter-in-law, where Kyoko says, "Isn't life disappointing?" And what a question. But it really, by that point in the film, you really think, man, what do I think about that? And what could I do about that? For me, at least, that is what this film did for me. And Ozu, we talked about Kore-eda as a master of family. Ozu is the kind of original.
He's the grand master of family.
He is indeed. And so, yeah.
And I think it may be on BFI Player.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
The restoration and etc. Again, a handy little aid memoir. Nice. Is also available at the moment on Blu-ray, I think.
Yeah, and
so
I think
it's available.
And they're
restored, I think, maybe.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, the restored one is on the BFI Player. There were big plans this summer for there to be a whole season of Japanese cinema from the BFI, which we would have been taking part of at GFT. And I don't know what the future is for that, but I think that there is still hopefully a plan for some of these films to get released into cinemas when we're all able to do cinema like we want to. And Tokyo Story will be right up there as a first choice for GFT to put on. Okay, so that's our number one. So Charlotte, it just remains for you to tell us what's the one.
So I've gone for.
Sorry, there's some noise in the background. Is that yeah? Is that some? Oh, there we go. It's done.
Julie Dash's Daughters of the Dust from 1991, which had a restoration in 2017. I'm ashamed to say really that I wasn't aware of the film until it was popularized by being an influence on Beyonce's visual album Lemonade.
I don't think you're alone there, Charlotte. I think a lot of people discovered it through Beyonce. Yeah,
no, and it's available on BFI Player to rent, and it's set in 1903, so it's only 30-40 years after the abolition of slavery, and it follows a multi-generational family of Gullah people, the Pazant family, who live on the sea islands off the coast of the southern US. So they're in a unique position in which the slave owners have left the plantation, and they remain on the island, the direct descendants of the slaves, including some of the elders who are the children of slaves, and it's just an unbelievably beautiful, sort of spiritual, dreamlike film, exploring the tension between some of the daughters of the family who have already moved to America, to the mainland, and sort of gone into society, and one of them has become a devout Christian, and they return to the islands to bring the rest of their family over to civilization as they see it, and there's this tension and conflict between the family who remain on the island as to whether they should join on the mainland or stay within this enclave of their traditions and their rituals and their sort of spiritual home where their ancestors were taken and held captive. It's honestly one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen. It's really experimental. Like Julie Dash herself calls it a foreign film in terms of its style, and she didn't make another feature after that, and I think she sort of reasons that it was just too experimental, too foreign in style for Hollywood. It kind of, I'd say, I mean, it's so singular, but compared to the career of like Terrence Malick or another filmmaker like that, it's it's a travesty, you know, that she only made this one film, but I mean, like, what a film to have made. It's incredible. And the narrator of the film is the unborn daughter of one of the couples. So it's just very, you know, it's exploring like the legacy of slavery and how, you know, this planned move to the north kind of is both, you know, a new form of kind of captivity, but also it's a symbol of emancipation, you know, from the past. It's like civilization, you know, Western civilization.
Did you see it in the cinema when it was re-released in 2017? Was it?
No, no, I just saw it.
No, me neither. That's why I asked, because it's one that I think there's people out there, even since that re-release, because it's been part of the conversation again recently. You know, like it's been lifted up again recently as you must see this film. I think there's an audience out there who would love to see it in the cinema again.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was going to say, there was a documentary that I saw recently, which I sadly can't remember the title of, but there are still Gullah people in the Sea Islands, very, very few now. And there's even more that issue of the people leaving that have gone into exile, of what's lost in terms of oral traditions of stories being passed down. And there's almost a kind of gentrification going on in the islands now, of people coming in because property is quite cheap, and just the prospect of all of that being wiped away. That kind of adds even more to the kind of beauty and uniqueness of this, because there's even less chance now of it somehow kind of surviving.
And you know, this, you know, in the current political climate, and you know, in light of Black Lives Matter and things, it's this, you know, it's the irony of them, you know, wanting this new life in America, but is it like better to stay, you know, in the tradition, in the community? Yeah, it's just incredible. And, you know, I think it has been more widely recognized and seen. And the cinematographer is Arthur Jaffa, you know, another amazing like experimental filmmaker. But I think she is working on a feature now. I read in an interview a biopic of Angela Davis.
Oh, wow.
But I'm not, it might be for TV, but yeah, just absolutely.
Sometimes TV is okay. Sometimes.
Yes.
No, she's had a really like, you know, consistent career in TV, and but not as a feature director.
Yeah.
But on just every single frame is like just absolutely amazing, just stunning.
What a brilliant recommendation. Those are our lists. And before we're running short of time, but I want to throw in a bunch of other titles that people gave us on Twitter. So let's see. The Sound of Music was mentioned by Yvonne Gordon. Uncle Buck from Joma West. Various mentions of National Lampoon's family movies. We've kind of steered away from silly comedies.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, there's a lot of truth in there. The Godfathers we already mentioned. Lilo and Stitch, some animation there. Greg Andrew on Twitter mentioned that, which reminds me, another film I considered is The Incredibles. That's a great film about being in a family and what that means. And then Short Film Sunday on Twitter, that's the username, said, I say pride because sometimes it's not about the family you're born into, it's about the family you make for yourself. Thanks, Short Film Sunday. Good pick. Is there anything else, any other titles that you guys particularly want to mention before we're out of time?
I wanted to say The Farewell. That was the other film that had come out recently, you know.
Yeah.
Just again that amazing film about, you know, the conflict between tradition and you know, independence. Yeah, I loved it.
Great.
And I was just going to mention so many Scottish things that you didn't think to mention, like Gillis MacKinnon's Small Faces or the Bill Douglas trilogy, or Ramsay's rat catcher, as well as, you know, we just talk about Kevin, and on it goes. And Shoot the Moon in honor of Alan Parker, who died recently.
Thank you, Alan, for keeping us right with our Scottish.
One more, Paul. Michael Haneke. All of his. Michael Haneke.
Oh, wow, yeah, man.
Those are some dark family.
They sure are, yeah.
Yeah, Uncle Buck or Michael Haneke.
Yeah. What a double bill. And also, another comment, when we were talking about Tokyo Story, David Gatton said, "Good Morning" is a lovely Ozu family film when you can't face the weight of Tokyo Story. So thanks, David. A lighter alternative. And I'm also, one final mention, I also want to mention Jim Sheridan's film In America, with Paddy Considine, Samantha Morton, and I don't know the names of the young actresses, but they're brilliant. And it's a really moving picture of a family in a particular situation. Yeah, semi-autobiographical, I think. But yeah, really good. Right, okay, we're out of time. Thanks everyone for watching. As I mentioned at the start, please take a minute to fill in the survey from our funders, BFI Film Feels Connected. You'll find it in the description of the show, linked there. And as hopefully you all know, GFT is reopening on Monday, 31st of August, which is only 2 weeks on Monday. So next Friday at 4 p.m, we're going to do a special GFT reopening Q&A with Glasgow Film CEO Alison Gardner right here on Facebook Live. So same time as Cinema Essentials, 4 p.m. on Friday. I'll be putting questions to Alison about what attending GFT will be like and what new safety measures will be in place when we reopen. And we'll also be able to talk about the films we're going to be playing. So that is very exciting. And we'll be live, so we'll be able to take questions for Alison about anything you want to ask about GFT reopening. And you can email us in advance as well, feedback@glasgowfilm.org. And then finally, I'll be back in 2 weeks' time on August 28th with 2 more guests for the final Cinema Essentials chat in this current series. We're just running it until the cinema reopens. And this one will be about romantic comedies. And the new film that we're going to look at is Elizabeth Sankey's recent documentary called Romantic Comedy, an affectionate and fun critique of this beloved genre, and it'll set us up really nicely to talk about our favorite rom-com. So I'll have 2 more guests on, and start thinking. Let us know your favorite romantic comedy, why you love it. Get in touch with us at Twitter, Facebook at Glasgow Film, or email us at feedback@glasgowfilm.org. Thanks to Heather Casali for today's live subtitles. I know live subtitling us is not an easy task, so thank you very much. And thanks to my colleague Claire for all the behind-the-scenes technical work as well. And finally, Alan, Charlotte, thank you so much for that great chat.
Thanks, Paul.
You're very welcome.
We'll say bye. Bye.
Bye.